And we're back. This is Arts Alive. I'm Linda Philippi, and my next guest is Heather Sharfeddin. And Heather is a multi-talented individual, we'll say, in the community. She's a writer, and she's here to talk about a couple of the books that she's written. And she's also a co-owner of the Velvet Monkey Tea Shop in downtown McMinnville. So we'll hear all about that as well. Welcome.
Thank you.
Let's start with your books.
Okay.
And I read two of your books
Great.
that you so graciously loaned me, and I have to say, I loved them.
Terrific.
Yeah.
That's good news.
I picked this one up first, The Sweetwater Burning, and I must say, I picked it up because it did say juicy reading on the cover, and you know, it was actually pretty juicy, so.
Great.
Yeah.
Great.
How did you get started writing?
Oh, well, I think first I was a storyteller. I grew up as that book is set in a remote part of Idaho, I grew up in an area where we didn't really have a lot of television, and even though it was in the 70s, we still had a very rich tradition of storytelling, and that's how people passed information. That's what they did in the evenings when they got together with their friends and with their neighbors, and I learned to really appreciate story before I became a writer. I actually, dabbled in visual arts before becoming a writer, and then at some point realized, I think I'd like to really, try my hand at writing a novel. Sweetwater Burning, which was actually titled Blackbelly in its hardcover version, was my first one to be published, and it was actually the fifth book that I wrote. So I wrote 4 that were unsuccessful prior to that. I'd never tried so hard at anything and failed so badly until I wrote that one, and finally I was successful, and it's been several since then.
Well, I want to talk about that a little bit. So
Sure.
you wrote your first book, and then you thought, man, I have this book, and then you started. Did you find an agent, or did you start shopping it around, or?
Yeah, I tried to find an agent because this was pretty much before people were really self-publishing a lot, and I was even once self-publishing kind of took off, I was pretty sure I still wanted to go the traditional publishing route, and I looked for an agent, and that was how I learned that I wasn't quite ready until I wrote Sweetwater Burning, the book that you have there. And when I finally wrote that one, an agent picked me up, and it sold right away. And so to me, that was an indicator that, okay, I'd finally practiced enough that it was ready for prime time. And so it still took a year before it came out, and had a chance to hold it in my hand, but it seemed like a fairly fast process at that point.
And so then once you had one book published, were you able to go back and publish the earlier novels?
Oh, no. No, they're awful.
Oh, no. So those are just in the drawer.
I call them my practice books.
Okay.
And I think for anyone who's an aspiring writer, it's really important to accept the fact that you will have practice books or you'll have practice stories, and that's okay. And if they never see the light of day, that's okay.
Julia Cameron has the line about give yourself permission to write the terrible first draft.
Yep.
So
exactly.
I think there's probably a lot of writers who maybe write something, and then when it doesn't turn into the great American novel, they say, oh God, I'm a failure, and they throw it in the drawer.
Yes.
And those that are successful are the ones that say, guess what, I'm gonna do it again.
I think the ones who are successful just have perseverance. That's really the only thing that separates us, is that we don't give up.
So maybe you being from sort of the rural and rugged northern country, you're persistent.
Yes. Yeah.
Now,
If nothing else, I'm persistent.
Do you have a lot of experience yourself with sheep?
Actually, at the time that I wrote that book, I had a small band of black-belly sheep.
Did you?
Yeah. My husband and I had bought 4 acres, and it was covered with blackberries. And so my dad said, well, my neighbor's got these sheep that I think would be great for your property. I'll bring them out. And so he was in Montana, and he threw them in the back of his truck and brought them out. There were 6. 5 girls and a boy, and that was our first. I had never raised sheep before. My parents had cattle when I was growing up, but not sheep. And these sheep are really prolific. So within, I think about 2 years, we had like 26 sheep.
Wow.
And they were eating the blackberries and everything else. So it was a really interesting experience. A lot of the sheep ranching that you find in that book was really taken right out of real life.
Well, what I thought was interesting, I mean, obviously you had, I mean, I assumed that you had some experience because, talking about the inoculations and the different
Yes,
kinds of things that
yeah.
you used, and I mean, the very specifics. It wasn't just like, oh, he went out to the barn and,
Right.
worked with the sheep. I mean,
Yeah.
it was very
It was
specific.
the real stuff, yeah.
So how did the story kind of come to you?
That story in particular, I was actually working on a different novel, and I woke up in the middle of the night. It was kind of one of those funny stories that you hear about. I woke up in the middle of the night with this idea about this kind of curmudgeonly sheep rancher who really shouldn't be inviting anyone to come live in his house, bringing his father home, and then hiring a home care nurse to take care of her. What would happen in that situation? How would he become like a real human being and become presentable?
And so, and it was, I mean, there was kind of I guess, a dual purpose. Number one, I think he felt like he owed it to his dad. There was a lot of unresolved, that father-son dynamic unresolved.
Yeah.
And then also, too, there was a financial component, right?
Yeah, he couldn't really afford to keep his father in the nursing home where he had him, but really it was sort of his love for his father, even though they were estranged. Chaz McPherson, the main character in the book, feels like the only thing that he can give his father at this point is the dignity of dying at home, and he wants to give him that gift, and so that's sort of the impetus of the book. And then enters this nurse who has some problems of her own, and they're sort of thrust into this very small world. It's snowy, it's muddy, it's cold. They're kind of in the house, and what ensues.
And she has her own demons.
She does, yeah,
obviously, yeah.
Yeah, she does.
I like the scenes where they're, she's drinking the whiskey, he's drinking the whiskey, and he's kind of, at some point, he's talking to her. She's like, I didn't know I was going to live with an alcoholic.
I know. The alcoholic is telling her that she's an alcoholic.
Exactly. And I thought, well, what else is there to do way out in the middle of
Right.
nowhere? Stuck with this dying old man. I mean, there you go. There's the whiskey bottle.
Yep, exactly.
I really liked it, though. It was a
thank
great
you.
book. And so I read this one first, and then I went back and read this one. And what I thought was really sort of fascinating and interesting was that it's set in Oregon.
Yeah.
I mean, it's set right around
Set in
here.
Shoals, yeah.
And when he's, driving over the bridge into Newburgh, over the
Yes.
river, and I thought, hey, I know, I've done that a million times.
Yes, yeah.
So that was kind of cool.
Yeah, that one was fun to write. It took me a long time to write about Oregon because I'm a transplant. And there's something about, setting in place is really important to me in my work. And I felt like it took me a really long time to feel like I could capture it in a very realistic way. So this was the first time that I wrote about Oregon, and I was actually pretty pleased with the way it came out.
And the character and the auction. You want to talk about the book a little bit?
Sure.
It's interesting.
Actually, the auction, when I was in high school, I worked at a consignment auction. And so that's where that sort of setting came from. It was a Tuesday night consignment auction, and it was pretty true to life the way I put it in the book, just kind of the way it happens and what happens at the auction and the transactions. And so I always found it a really fascinating kind of gritty environment, but it's also an environment where recycling is like the name of the game. And so it's really pertinent to today. And so I thought, what a great setting for this book.
You know what it made me think of is when I first moved to Oregon, which was in 1987, for a couple of months I lived in Wilsonville, but I worked in Aurora. And there was an auction, I think it might have been Tuesday night for all I know, in Aurora. And we went a few times, and I thought, oh my gosh, this is totally I'm from the Bay Area, so this is the rural life. Here we are in this little dinky town, and people are selling beds and
tractors
and all kinds of stuff. It was just, and it brought all that. I thought, gosh, I forgot all about that.
Yeah,
really
it's a fascinating world. It really is. So that was kind of where the idea came from for that book, and then I wanted to talk about rural commerce and the auction, but I also wanted to work in the whole the economy of the migrant workers in the valley and how they fit into the way we do business and how they're sort of unseen but so critical to what we do. And
Especially
So
here.
It was yeah, it was really, that part was really difficult from the perspective that at times I felt like I was writing about something that I didn't have the right to write about. So it was a little bit challenging for me.
I liked when he offered the two guys a job, and they said, well, how long is it going to last? Because we're going to, first we're going to prune grapes, and then we're going to pick
Right,
strawberries.
yeah.
He's like, no,
They're not thinking long term.
This is a
right?
full-time
Yeah.
job, but if you are used to seasonal work, that's
Right.
the way your mind works.
Yeah.
That was very interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. So that was kind of the purpose of the book, was to really kind of shed some light. Usually when I'm writing a book, there's some deeper story that I want people to just kind of peer into. There's the superficial story, which should be fun and interesting, and then there's that sort of subtle story that goes on underneath that you kind of hope people think about afterwards.
Oh, sure, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, it could be, these are not real long sagas,
No.
but, there's any one of those little threads could be sort of teased out and followed, but it does make you wonder. Heather, I want to switch gears, though, and talk
Sure.
about the tea room.
Sure.
Because, the Velvet Monkey Tea Room, which is when I first met you.
Yeah.
And you want to talk about that a little bit?
Sure. Well, my husband and I my husband's name is Salam. We opened Velvet Monkey Tea in, I think it was the weekend of 4th of July. We've lived in McMinnville for about 3 years, and so we were looking for just the right space downtown for our tea room. We have been in the coffee and tea business for about 20 years and thought we really want to focus just on tea. Our tea room is an Asian-style tea room, but if you like British-style tea, we've got Earl Grey, we've got classic black, we've got things that you will love there. But we tend to be a little bit more towards the Asian style as far as the drinking style.
I love that jasmine pearl.
Yeah.
my God,
Yeah.
it's so
That's
good.
one of my favorites too. And bulk herbs, that kind of thing. So, and we've had a really warm welcome from the community. It's been
Well,
great.
what I love about it is, it's such a nice place to go. Just go down, get the tea, and of course, there's all the little yum-yums. Let's not forget about those. If people are looking for a little something to have with the tea,
Chocolate. My husband loves his chocolate.
chocolate and the little the date bars.
Yep.
And the shortbread cookies. Not that I
The
would know anything
baklava,
about that.
yeah.
And the baklava, yeah, those are so good.
Yeah.
And it's really, it's wonderful. It's been a nice, I'd say, a really nice addition to the community.
good.
We've had tea rooms in the past, but as far as I know, you're the only tea room at present.
I think so.
Yeah.
So. Yeah. Linfield college students have just really loved it. It was great. Right before Christmas, they were all studying for their finals, and our tables were just packed with these students with their laptops and their books and their pots of tea.
Isn't that great?
It was really fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
it was great.
it's kind of nice because tea seems, so convivial and so elegant. I love that. And I know we were talking a little bit about, the China versus metal versus pottery.
Right, yeah.
If you want to say controversy, and where do you weigh in on that?
Well, I definitely believe that a nice clay, like a Yixing clay from China, for a black tea is just the best way to go. I also like my green tea out of cast iron or metal cups. It's just there's something about the acidity level in it that just brings it forward.
And now, what about herb tea?
Herbal tea, because it's not really a true tea. It's honeybush or rooibos, which is a South African. I don't think that, it doesn't seem to matter to me. It doesn't seem to get a different flavor depending on how you drink it.
Okay.
But the black tea and the green tea, for sure, you get a different flavor depending on how you drink
So,
it.
I guess like anything else, whether it's chocolate or wine or whatever substance you enjoy, the more that you get into it and the more you know about it,
Oh, yeah.
the more particular you're going to be.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
Well, I really want to thank you for being here today
Thank
and
you.
look forward to reading some more of your work.
Great. Thank you.